Okay, sir. So at the outset, let me welcome you on behalf of Director Nitar Bhopal, faculty, and all the participants for this 5 days ATAL FDP on innovation, entrepreneurship, and startup. Sir, this is the third day, and around 100 participants have joined Pan India, and they belong to AICT institutes from engineering, technology, science, management, pharmacy, humanities, and so on. So, uh, friends, I would like to introduce Dr. Tanuj Nandan sir. Dr. Tanuj Nandan is a professor and former head, School of Management Studies, Motilal Nehru Institute of Technology, Allahabad, Prayagraj, Uttar Pradesh, India. His area of interest include financial derivatives, international finance, and corporate finance. He possesses 25 years of research and teaching experience. In addition to his academic responsibilities, Dr. Nandan presently looks after other administrative positions at the institute level, notably as Associate Dean, Academics and Faculty in Charge, Training and Placement, MNNITA. He takes keen interest in efforts directed towards environmental sustenance. Dr. Tanuj Nandan completed his MBA and PhD specializing in financial management. He participates regularly in several national and international conferences and seminars and contributes research articles and papers to journals of repute. He is also a reviewer to several journals. He conducts management development programs and training programs and is invited to speak at various forums. He also renders consultancy services to corporate organizations. He has represented India under a Rotary International Group Study Exchange Program to Indiana, USA. He has undertaken several industrial visits in the US, UK, and Western Europe. He was conferred the Bharat Vikas Award in 2019. So, friends, we have such a big galaxy with us, okay, who has moved throughout the world and has obtained experience, and is also into the area of finance. Today, sir would be deliberating with us on various aspects, and one of the important aspect is how to select a business idea. So, sir today would be discussing with us about two aspects. Number one is identifying business opportunities and critical success factors for Indian startups. He has undertaken a research on this, so definitely he would be sharing on this, identifying business opportunities and critical success factors for Indian startups. So both these issues he would be linking and presenting in his deliberation. Sir, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nishit sir. And it's a pleasure really to be here with all the participants. Privileged to be with my old organization, NITTTR Bhopal. Esteemed participants, this is a 5-day program on entrepreneurship, and you would have wide galaxy of speakers, all of them who are coming with their own take on entrepreneurship. And I intend to take up today a little bit about, firstly, how to identify some business opportunities, and then certain critical success factors for Indian startups. Now, the latter part of this, which is the critical success factor part, this really comes from some research that I have been pursuing for some time now, period over 5 years, and I would like to share some of the learning outcomes. Also, we have a couple of incubation cells in my institute. So, having been quite closely involved with those, I also got to learn quite a few things from the students, from those students who intend to become entrepreneurs themselves. So naturally, we know most of us are, I think almost all of us are academicians here. In fact, like Nishit sir said, all of us are academicians from AICT institutions. So in a teaching learning process, I think both get enriched. And in this process of interacting with the students regarding their startup ideas, I got to learn a lot. And that is what I intend to share with you today. So I'll just come up with my presentation and then we'll take it forward. And yes, definitely, um, I would request you to please ask any questions or to please contribute anything you would like to add to whatever I've said. All of us here have substantial experience. So I know everyone can contribute in a way that can be beneficial to all the rest. So please feel free to stop me wherever I am. I don't feel really disturbed by that. If you have anything to contribute or anything to ask, please go ahead and ask. So, like Sir introduced the topic, it is identifying business opportunities as well as the CSFs for Indian startups. Now, quick look at what we propose to do in the next, let's say, hour and a half, and then remaining 20 minutes or so we can take up for discussion. The first, of course, is the very crucial component of identification of business opportunities. Then I'll take you about to this project that I have been doing. It's a research project. We call it Deciphering Startups. In this project, as part of this project, we developed 10 cases. So what we did was we did a study on startups, some of which were successful, so 6 success stories, and some which were not so successful. The idea was to try and identify what is it that the successful startups do, which probably the not so successful startups do not do. Is there anything at all? Very difficult to generalize, but we were able to come up with certain observations. So I'll share those with you. Based on these 10 case studies, we identified as many as 12 critical success factors, which I'll be sharing with you today. So let's move forward. Now, the thing is that identification of business opportunities is really the lynching pin for successful entrepreneurship. Everything rests upon this pin. So if an entrepreneur is able to identify a business opportunity.
Sir, we cannot hear you.
Okay, how long back did you lose my audio? Just give me 1 minute.
Sir, at my end, you are audible.
Right, so it's possible if we can have a show of hands or some way of knowing that is this a problem which is common or is it specific to 1 or 2 people?
You are clearly audible at my end.
Okay, thank you, Abhigji.
Yeah, welcome,
Anyone
sir.
else? Let's make it easier by asking if there's anyone else who's not able to hear. Okay, so apparently it is at one end. So if you could please check your internet connection or maybe your headphones or audio, whatever.
Okay, now it's audible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And it's good that you took out time to point it out. Okay, so we were talking about the fact that everything rests upon the ability to identify a good business opportunity, and then everything after that is just hard work. So this is where I would like to start. Now, being a successful entrepreneur demands the ability to identify a current problem faced by customers or society in general and coming up with a workable solution for the same. So we talk about the problems of society, but most of entrepreneurship, if you leave aside social entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is commercial in nature. So if we are trying to resolve a problem of society, we are trying to make those people our customers or clients. So here I have used the 2 terms, interchangeably. So the thing is the ability to identify a current problem which is being faced by customers or by society and coming up with a solution which works. Now, the important questions that need to be answered here are, or I have given them the term tests. So the business idea that you come up with needs to qualify three tests. One thing is, of course, is there an unsolved problem or an unresolved problem facing society? That is the first. Even if it has been solved in the past, can I offer a substantially superior solution or even a somewhat better solution? And most importantly, can I deliver this solution at a reasonable price? Can I make it affordable? So, can I deliver a solution which is not substantially more expensive than existing solutions or which can be afforded by the majority of your customers? Now, we, for example, in India, we have a huge amount of diversity. So it's possible that all the solutions that we develop might not be able to address the requirements of all the members of the population. But can I deliver this solution to the majority of the people at a reasonable price? Because the concept of reasonability of price is also different for different people. For me, maybe spending 2000 rupees on some device that helps me keep away mosquitoes might not be such a big thing. But for someone living on the roadside, that's a huge cost. So the solution that we deliver needs to be affordable because that is what makes it commercially viable. So if there are these three tests that we have, these three questions that we have been able to answer, then we can think of our business idea as viable. So ideation is the key. The ability to generate good ideas happens to be the crux of successful business opportunity generation by entrepreneurs. Now, it's important to remember, it's possible for me, I read lots and lots of material because I have been teaching this paper also. So there is an introductory course or introductory section to this course about how to identify business opportunities, and it talks about government reports and private sector reports and all that. I'm not going into that. What I'm saying is, regardless of whatever is the subject domain of the entrepreneur, he needs to be someone who is constantly aware of the global environment. He's scanning the global environment, and thereby he is trying to look at where an opportunity exists which can be exploited in the form of a business opportunity. So something which has commercial value. Now, this helps in identification of business opportunities early. Remember the adage, the early bird catches the worm. So the person who identifies the business opportunity first will be most likely the one who actually ends up making commercial profit out of it. If you go back into history, so many technologies have been developed completely independently of each other, but at the same timeline, within the same timelines. So what is happening is that there's more than one person or more than one set of individuals who's working on a business idea. And therefore, it's important to come up with a solution in a timely manner. So the early bird catches the worm. Now here I'll introduce a term. So ideation happens to be the inspiration component of entrepreneurship, and most of the rest is simply perspiration. So we have heard people saying that genius is 5% inspiration and 95% perspiration. Both are required. But ideation happens to be the inspiration component of this. And I call this the intelligence phase. So, of the entire aspect of entrepreneurship, the aspect of coming up with a workable business idea, that is the intelligence phase because it requires application of intellect. Now, this is not recent. Entrepreneurship is not recent. It has been a constant phenomenon throughout human history. Now, naturally, if you have students who come and ask you, the question that is to be asked is, in which areas do we go and look for innovations? So I have put together a suggestive list. This is by no means exhaustive, but 3 good places to look is firstly, one's own area of technical expertise, one's own technical domain. But I will bring up some examples later which will show us that this is not imperative. The entrepreneur does not himself need to be an expert or a technical expert in that particular domain in which he is innovating. So we'll come to that later. But this is an important aspect that one's own technical domain is a very important, a very good area to start looking for opportunities for innovation. In recent years, IT-enabled services have taken the lion's share of innovations. So the thing is that IT-enabled services have the potential to bring in disruptive change. And disruptive change is disruptive here is not a negative term, as you're all aware. It means something which is different from incremental. So we are not moving from one step to the next incrementally. We are making a giant leap. And we have seen huge examples of disruptive change based on IT and IT-enabled services in recent years. And of course, the third thing is that rather than looking at the first or the second, we just look at an existing problem that needs a solution. So for example, my domain happens to be risk management and finance. So I could think of risk management and finance as a possible area. I could also think of some solutions which are IT based, but recently, see, we are researchers also. We know that the starting point of all research is a question that comes to the mind of the researcher. So recently, my son developed dengue. And I realized that in spite of the fact that we use creams and oils and mosquito nets and coils, mats, and vaporizers, we have been using these incrementally. But over a period of time, the mosquitoes develop a resistance, they become impervious to this, and therefore we need to keep on innovating. So I identified this problem and I started working on it. In fact, I have made some progress in this as well. So what I'm trying to point out here is that it is neither the first, which is my own technical domain, nor is it an IT-enabled service. But just because I noticed the problem which exists, I'm working on a solution to that. So that could also be a good business opportunity. Now, sorry, I'll just to break the monotony. I would like you to share here with me some outstanding business opportunities that have successfully been exploited by entrepreneurs. So some highly successful business opportunities, both at global and local levels. And I'm just giving a very small suggestive list, but I would like to request you to please unmute your mics and add to this. Right. So as we move forward, I would request you to add to this. What we'll do here is that from each of these examples, we will try to draw lessons, learning outcomes from these examples. Now, First one, this logo, does anyone remember?
Meta, sir.
Meta.
This is Meta, exactly. Perfect. So this is Meta, commonly known to us as
Facebook.
Facebook.
Facebook, sir. Recently, it is renamed.
Yes. So at the business end, they have renamed it to Meta, but it actually is for the user end, it is still Facebook. So we know that humans are social animals, and someone had the wisdom to realize that we have this social need, and they created this platform. And the rest, as they say, is history. Everyone knows how successful this is. Now, here I would like to mention one thing. There's a movie, many of you would have seen it already. It's frequently on TV. This movie is based quite closely on the story of Facebook, dramatized, of course. If you have not seen it, please watch it because there are learning outcomes here. Now, what I'm saying here is that uh, when I said that good starting point for a business idea could be your own technical domain, actually, Mark Zuckerberg, who's the most visible part of Facebook, was not originally the person who had done the programming for this. In fact, if you go into the history, you will find that uh, Zuckerberg was more the organizer of the whole thing. So is the person who is able to put a team together. And it is believed that there were two brothers, twin brothers, called the Winklevoss brothers, and they had developed this program along with some other people. They had developed this program. And if common belief is to be believed, Mark Zuckerberg went into the hostel room and took away the computer in which the programming had been done. And if you're not speaking, please mute your mic. Right. So Mark Zuckerberg went into the room. He went away with their computer and therefore the code of the program. So that is how Facebook came into existence. So you will find that programming was not his strong point, but he put together a very good team. If you watch the Social Network, you will find that he put together a very good team. He had a member in this team whose father was in a senior financial position. So his father was able to help them with finances whenever required. Mark Zuckerberg, like I said, was better at organizing things. And then he had people who helped him to develop the programming further and to popularize it. Also, if you have seen it, I don't know if anyone has seen it, you may please let me know. Okay, so they were.
Yes, sir. Seen it.
Okay, wonderful. So if you remember, in that movie, these Winklevoss brothers, who were basically British citizens but studying at Harvard, and they were also um, Olympic rowing medalists in rowing. Now, after Mark Zuckerberg ran away with their computer, they went to the president of Harvard and they lodged a complaint with him. And the president, his response was classic because the president said that it is a history or it's a tradition at Harvard to innovate. So if he has made away with one of your innovations, you can always come up with another innovation. So that is the kind of culture of innovation that they have there. And actually, they did actually manage to come up with a different kind of innovation after that. So that's one thing. So here, the learning outcome from this is that a team is important. And I will come back to this. I will give you more examples that I have seen much closer of how teamwork makes entrepreneurship successful. This everyone knows. This is Ola. This is Uber. These are cab hailing or ride hailing apps. Now, what has Ola and Uber done? What have they done? They have made it. Yes, please. Yes, please.
What have they done? Meaning they changed
How have they
the
contributed?
business model.
Yes, I mean, how have they contributed to the way we spend our lives?
They made travel easy for us.
Exactly. They have made travel easier and also cheaper. So, if you remember those three tests that I spoke about, see, if you talk about tier two cities like the one that I am in right now, here four-wheeler taxis were not very common. If you go to the airport or if you go to the railway station, maybe 7, 8 years ago, these four-wheeler taxis were not common at all. And if you were able to get hold of these four-wheeler taxis, they were actually very unreasonably priced. And I think this happens across most tier two cities. What, and in fact, even if you look at other radio taxis, they were much more expensive than this. What Ola and Uber have done is that they have exploited the power of IT, but more than that, they have generated employment for thousands and thousands of cab drivers, very, very distinguished or dignified kind of employment. I know that in my son's school, they have something like 45 or 50 buses. Almost half the bus drivers somehow managed to buy their own cabs and started driving Ola and Uber. So, on one side, they have generated employment, and on the other side, they have made it possible for people like us to travel affordably in cabs. In fact, sometimes it is cheaper than even a three-wheeler auto. Sometimes you might do a comparison and you find that there's no real difference. And you get the comfort of a closed vehicle, air conditioned, much safer. So they have taken a life problem and they have converted it into a business opportunity. Okay. This is Swiggy. This is Zomato. Now again, beautiful innovation. Beautiful innovation because till such apps, not just Swiggy and Zomato, but till food ordering apps came along, if someone wanted to open a restaurant, it was almost invariably necessary to have seating space in the restaurant and kitchen space. Now, I know of many outlets that are purely kitchens. They don't need to spend money to hire or lease property in a commercially viable area, commercially viable in the sense where footfalls are sufficient for their business to make sense. So you can now exist purely as a kitchen. That is one of the beneficiaries. The second beneficiary is the hundreds, hundreds is a very gross understatement, thousands and thousands of people who make a living delivering food today. And I was reading an article, it's called The Gig Economy, where you are basically working as a freelancer. And they have provided employment. So they have come up with a completely new business model. And you would have heard that there was an IPO. What happened in this IPO? Zomato came out with an IPO, initial public offering. The price that they got was tremendous. It was tremendous. So the valuation that was done of this business is very, very high. So what they have done is they have created huge amount of value. And in finance, my area being finance, we say that the ultimate objective of a manager is to add value to the shareholder. And this is exactly what they have managed to do. So they have created opportunities for business owners. They have created opportunities for the delivery people, and particularly in a time like the pandemic. We have many colleagues here, as you would have at your end also, who are either forced bachelors or who are living alone. Now, it's not possible for them always to go out and eat or always to cook at home. So many of them simply order out, and order out in the sense they order from some of these apps. So that's another example. And then we have this chain of rooms called Oyo rooms. Oyo rooms makes it possible for people to stay at affordable rates at various properties across the country. So it is another wonderful business opportunity that has been created. So I will come back and ask you if you have any examples which you would like to share. But these were examples more at a larger level. Let me just bring you to some examples at a much smaller level from my own institute. So the startup ideas that students have come up with, and they have actually converted these into um, at least later stage startups. So some inspiring innovations at the local level. Now here we have a student, or he's no longer a student, he passed out, but he was a student of the Department of Biotechnology. We have a BTech in biotechnology and an MTech and PhD in biotechnology as well. Conducive for the farming of bananas. So over the past several years, many farmers have converted to farming bananas, cultivation of bananas. And that's why if you travel along the highway, you will see all around you this district called Koshambi. You have huge tracts of land which are under banana cultivation. Now, this student of ours, he realized that for good varieties of banana, normally the farmers here were importing the plants or the saplings or the plant culture from south, particularly Kerala. And what he did was he came up with a system of tissue culture which allowed him to grow those plants, and now he is doing it commercially and he's selling these banana plants through whatever process he might have followed. So this takes us back to the three places that three ways that I had listed. One's own technical domain, or IT enabled services, and so on. So in this case, the student, what he did was he took up an area very much within his own domain of expertise. So that's a very good place to start always. Then we had another student, also by chance from the same department, but she was an undergraduate student. She was doing a BTech, and she came up with this idea. We have currently 11 functional hostels on our campus, and in all of these hostels, we have food which is left over every day. And there is this problem of disposal. So on a pilot basis, she took it. She started taking a small amount of food and converted it to small pellets after drying it out completely in an oven. Small pellets the size of methi, fenugreek seeds. And of course, there will be a series of testing that she is required to go through before that chicken feed that she's producing is considered safe enough for feeding to the chickens. But at least she came up with this idea, and if it goes ahead, she has a wonderful business idea, and she is taking care of an applied problem which we have been facing all along. There's always leftover food in our kitchens. In fact, it is believed that about a third of India's food goes waste in various forms. So prepared food is a big component of that. So that is another beautiful idea that we saw. Then this one was probably the most inspiring innovation that our students came up with, and this is currently functional. Now, there was a group of students who, second year students, very fresh. So, second year BTech students, which means they are just 1 year after their class 12th, young students, 18, 19 years old. They realized that if you are traveling in a train, then in the AC coaches, you get the bedding. But in the non-AC coaches, in the sleeper coaches, there's no bedding that is provided. So this is, they had done their study and they had come up with this proposal before the pandemic struck. Now, of course, they are not giving bed rolls even in AC classes. But what they did was they did a complete study. The idea behind the study was, can we provide linen to the passengers in the sleeper class as well? And because Prayagraj happens to be the headquarters of North Central Railway, so they spoke to the divisional rail manager, and they took permission that on pilot basis, on certain trains, in certain coaches, they would be allowed to supply this linen. And when we spoke to these students, they had done such an in-depth study that they had gone to Ambala to a manufacturer of blankets and found out the exact rate at which they would be able to procure blankets. They had gone somewhere in Gujarat and they had found out what would be the cost of bed sheets and towels. They had done the entire study, so they knew what would be their cost and what would be the revenue that they would need to generate. So, do you think that this is an applied problem faced by society?
This is a scope for value addition, sir.
Not necessarily. There is no solution that exists right now.
Yeah, that is it. But at least they have identified a area which needs to be a plug which needs to be filled up.
Exactly. So that is
A
the
loophole
whole.
is there. Yeah, a loophole is there. That is the
whole
essence of
focus.
entrepreneurship, basically.
Right. So they have done that. In fact, had it not been for this pandemic, uh, probably right now it would have been very successful. It was celebrated a lot at the local level because the railways itself took it up. They appreciated this project, but it was an idea which was very good. Even now, if you look at it, you at certain platforms you will find disposable linen which is now being offered to you. And that is a big boon because it's possible that you're doing certain aspects of your journey by air and then certain other aspects by train. Or even if you're doing your entire journey by train, then you're required, because you don't get bedrolls, you're required to carry all of that bedding with you. And if you're also traveling by air, then you have restriction on how much baggage you can carry. So it's a really good kind of, see, the idea here is just to try to identify how we can look at a problem and try to see if there's a solution to it or there's a better solution to it. Okay. Now, the icing really, in all my experience with students, the icing on the cake was something which I will talk about slightly later. It was a group of students who were manufacturing aerostructures for UAVs. UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles like your drones. Now, this is inspiring for me because the group of students who came up with this idea, business idea, converted it to a successful enterprise, and then sold it off at a huge profit. They were as unlike entrepreneurs as you can imagine. In fact, they were academically very weak students, and regardless of that, they were wonderful entrepreneurs. Although they did not appear to be, outer packaging was that there is no iota of entrepreneurship in them. But this really is a standout example. I will share it with you slightly later because I am trying to tie this in with a lot of other things also. Right. So apart from this, I just came up with a very small suggestive list But would anyone like to contribute any other example which really has made a change to the way we function or with the way we live our lives?
Urban company is one of that, which is offering services.
Exactly. That is the next thing that I had on my mind, and I had not considered it. Particularly today, if you look at it, urban company is providing a wonderful service. Firstly, because it's not possible, generally both spouses are working. It's not always possible for people to do everything. You need to get your gas burner cleaned, you need to get your ceiling fans cleaned, you need to get your house cleaned or washroom cleaned. That is one thing. Another thing is people in the pandemic are not very comfortable when it goes like when you are going to a salon or a barber shop for obvious reasons. That is one of the places which could harbor a lot of contagion. So urban company is a wonderful example. They saw a need and they filled in the gap. I have mentioned Ola and Uber. There is this ad of Hyderabad where Ranveer Singh is doing the advertisement. It's a two-wheeler, I think, motorcycle rental where you get a motorcycle with a driver and you can go from point A to point B at a very low cost.
Even at Bangalore, there is one such. Bounce is the name, I guess.
Right. I think this has stuck to my memory more because simple reason Ranveer Singh is doing so much of advertising for them. But yes, even here, our students were doing this from the hostel till such time as we disallowed them from keeping two-wheelers. Students were offering this service and they had put up posters all over. In fact, see, another business opportunity, we disallowed students from keeping two-wheelers. So what one of the students did was that there was a vacant industrial plot at the back. He took it on lease and he hired some people to park the two-wheelers because we did not allow them to bring the two-wheelers on campus. And ours is a completely residential program. Not completely, it's over 80% residential. So out of 6,000 students, 4,800 remain on campus. So they are not allowed to bring this two-wheeler inside the campus. So what he did was he hired some people. So when the student comes to the hostel, he will give the parking attendant a call. Parking attendant will come and take the vehicle and park it. And when he needs the vehicle, he will call the parking attendant and the parking attendant will bring the vehicle again. For this, he was charging something like 300 rupees per two-wheeler. Now you can understand that in a group where you have 4,800 students, there would be something like 1,500 two-wheelers. So if you multiply that by a factor of 300, you can understand the kind of revenue he would have generated. Okay. Now, it's not only important to innovate, it's also important to accelerate the innovation, which means to speed it up. And I will give you an example. Although I would advise, strongly recommend, please read this book. It's a lovely book. It is authored by Lawrence D. Burns. And Lawrence D. Burns was, with General Motors, he was heading the R&D division for certain of their projects. Now, as you can see, the cover of the book says, The Quest to Build a Driverless Car. Now, I'm sure many of you would be familiar with this, that driverless cars, there has been one generation of self-driving cars which has already come in and it has been retired also. And we are into the next generation now. So there are many companies which are offering driverless cars, which means self-driving cars. Now, in this book, the narrative is very beautiful. So Lawrence Burns narrates that initially they were working, General Motors and many other companies independently. Apart from that, several independent researchers were working for self-driving cars. But the pace of development was slow. What the US government did was that it brought out a challenge. It gave them a timeline, and it said that the timeline was something like 17 or 18 months only, which is actually a very small amount of time to develop something that big. It said that we are giving you a challenge that you have to complete some 60 miles or something like that of a desert track that we will be declaring later. We will not tell you the terrain right now. All we are saying is that it is a desert terrain, and you will be required to develop a car which will drive those 60 miles, which will complete those 60 miles. Naturally, it's a race. So the one who finishes first will get some awards. And after this, this became an annual effort, an annual event. But what that did was it spurred on the pace of the innovation. So that became an accelerator. So here, like I said, we have two incubation centers in my institute. One of those is not just an incubator, but it's also an accelerator. So what we do is once we find that a business idea is good, we help the students to develop it much, much faster. Because like I just, we had discussed that many people work independently on similar concepts. So it's very important to have the first mover advantage. So therefore, the individual or the team whose innovation comes to the fore first will be the one that reaps the benefits. So therefore, acceleration of innovation is also quite important in entrepreneurship. Now, I will slightly change the sorry. I will just change the tone for a couple of minutes, and then I will come back to what we were talking about. I just want to link three important aspects of our country's economy. One thing is education. So that is one E. For many years, we have taken pride in saying that it is one of the best in the world, because we have managed to produce outstanding intellectual talent, innovators, and industry leaders, and we continue to do so. Also, over the past decade, our economic growth has been very impressive. And several Indian companies have managed to generate employment for large numbers of fresh graduates. Also, many of these Indian companies are rated as excellent places to work. So where is the problem? The challenge is that education, employment, and economy are under strain today. We keep on reading this data, particularly in AICT institutions, where we have this data about low level of employability of graduates. So naturally, the finger points towards us faculty as well. Overall, the rate of employment generation, considering the number of graduates that we are producing, is going down. Automation is taking over several jobs. Like when Sir was introducing, he mentioned that I have been looking after training and placement for many years. So I know that in many trades, like production and engineering, production and industrial engineering, many jobs are now automated. So in the manufacturing sector, automation is a job killer. And the number of job seekers will keep on increasing because we are producing more and more employable graduates. Now, we have unique demographics, so there is an employment gap. And of course, the economy currently is slowing down for known reasons. So the question that we need to answer here is, how can we make sure that the talent and skill pool of India's vast educated young population can be put to optimal use for the benefit of our economy when employment opportunities happen to be limited, if we continue to do business as usual? And the solution, of course, is entrepreneurship. Now, so this is just my submission here, that entrepreneurship is the pin that links together education, employment, and economy, and this is the way forward. So it's very important that you're attending this, you're participating in this FDP on entrepreneurship, because we need to inculcate in our students the spirit of true entrepreneurship. And I will share with you certain experiences that I have gained over time. Now, I'll just skip this. Important thing is, let's talk about 12 critical success factors. So what we did was, we did some research along with a team of students. I did a research and we named it Deciphering Startups. So trying to make sense of what makes startups successful. We developed 10 cases, as I mentioned, based on 6 success stories and 4 not so successful. Sorry. We identified 12 critical success factors, and let us explore them in detail. So what I'm sharing with you comes partly from this project, partly from my experience in sitting and evaluating this startup proposals, and partly from the research that I have done as a follow-up. Now, when we started our incubation center, the first incubation center here, sometime in 2016, we had some space and we had some amount of money sanctioned for startups. And our concept was that we will ask students to submit their ideas, and we will shortlist out of those and award the space for setting up the startup, as well as the funding to those which were selected. So this is what we wanted to do. Now, in the first round, we got 27 applications. And when we were screening those applications, most of the students came forward and they made presentations. We realized that we had started out with a completely wrong idea, because the students in most cases did not need our money, and in several cases they did not even need the space. Many of them were working out of their own labs, or they had set up their own space, or they were working out of their hostel rooms. They did not need more space than that. And because when we were screening these applications, we had also called on board some bankers for the screening. So we realized that these bankers were also happy to finance them. So we were wrong on both fronts. First front, they did not need our money. Second front, they did not need our space. But what we did learn was very, very important. So this is what I would like to share. So what I'm going to present before you comes from this experience, as well as the case studies that I'm talking about, as well as some research that I've done subsequently. So one thing is that the first mover advantage matters. What this means is that there is a long-standing debate on the timing of business entry, and there are benefits to be gained by timing the entry correctly. So what this means is that there's always a question that, should I enter into a completely new venture when no one else is there and face the uncertainties, or should I wait, let others make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and then enter later? So based on the cases that we studied, we realized that at least in the Indian context, and based on these limited cases, it's beneficial if an entrepreneur moves first. So he doesn't wait for anyone else to take the plunge, but he moves first. So successful Indian ventures, which is based on this case study, they prove the advantage of entering a line of business early rather than as a second stage or at a later stage. So the clear underlined uh, learning outcome here is innovators win. In the Indian context, innovation pays. So we know that there is stiff competition from major players, global players, but Ola, which is conceived in India, holds the largest section of the market share with presence across so many cities in India and so many lakhs of driver partners. This is because they came into the market before the competitors did. The second thing, of course, appears to be something that is hardly worth defending because it is so logical. But we have seen examples where people have started out with an infeasible business idea, business model, in the sense that there are several aspects of feasibility. We have technical feasibility, so the business could be technically viable. You have aspects of social feasibility, it could be acceptable by society, but maybe it is not totally financially feasible. So the economic feasibility, I'm using the term financial and economic feasibility interchangeably here, although there is a slight difference between the two. But from an economic standpoint, feasibility is vital. So you cannot have a very good business model where you are able to generate huge portion of the market, but without getting profits. Although in recent past, we have seen valuations going high for those companies which have still not broken even. So those companies which are still suffering losses have also been valued high by stock markets simply on the basis of their market shares, so customer base. So this now in the recent 1 year or so, this has been shaken. But we need to remember that the objective of a business is to create capital. It's not to destroy capital. I'm not naming the business here. It's a very well-established business in India. But in Hindi, there's a saying, Amdani Athanni Kharcha Rupaiya. So on revenues of 700 crores, they are giving away freebies of 1400 crores year after year. How long can they afford to do it? So consistency and timing of cash flows is very, very important. Also, if you need to make a business more successful, then you might need to come up with innovative financing ideas. For example, crowdfunding has worked very well for Indian startups in recent years. Even in my WhatsApp, one of my WhatsApp groups, which I happen to share with my MBA classmates, one day we got a message that one of our classmates was looking to buy out the share of his uncle's business also, and he was short by a few lakh rupees. So someone had posted in the group that all of us are doing well, and if you feel that you can help him, this is the account number, please put some money into his account. So everyone contributed decent amounts. It's a good example of crowdfunding. Within, I think, less than a week, all the money that he required, and it was substantial amount of money, he already had. And of course, later on, he paid it back. Now, this next concept is actually very, very interesting. MFE. MFE is more like an Indian homegrown concept. I don't know if you're aware of it. This is media for equity. Now, we know that in order for a business to become successful and over a period of time, you need to grow. You need to spread out. and therefore you need to publicize yourself. Now, the thing is that in order to publicize and in such a competitive environment, you need to depend on media. And media is notoriously expensive. So, what many companies have started doing is that they have come up with this concept of media for equity. That, okay, you are a startup, you cannot afford your own equity. Sorry, you cannot afford your own media. So, we will provide you with media slots. In exchange for that, you give us a portion of your equity. So that way, they make an investment right now in the media expenses, but later on, they have the opportunity to participate in the growth of the company, which of course they would have um, valued, or they would have seen the probability of beforehand. So this media for equity is a very interesting concept, and it works. Okay. Now, this was a particular learning experience that we had with our students. The protection of intellectual property rights. Particularly, this group of students, which I had mentioned that I will talk about later, and they were a group of engineering students, BTech students, who were working out of their hostel rooms, team of 4 or 5 people, and they had come up with a very innovative idea. The innovative idea was that they would create the aerostructures for unmanned aerial vehicles, which are used either for toys, so they are used in the toy industry, or they are used for surveillance. How they did it was they used 3D printing, and they had certain schematics and everything. Now, this group of students, they had prepared a PPT of everything they were doing, and they were going around showing various interested parties their PPT. Now, what is the risk here? The risk here is that there is really very little that is not replicable in this. Anyone can take that idea and replicate it. So as long as they don't have a patent on this technology or something, they should not go around publicizing what they're doing just like that. So what they were doing was they were supplying these structures to one of India's large toy manufacturers. And later on, this group of students managed to sell their idea. So they started on this when they were, I think, in the 3rd year, worked throughout the 3rd year, worked throughout the 4th year, and then they passed out. Now, when they came for their convocation, so this was just about 5 months after they had passed out. They had passed out in June. This was 2018, and the convocation was in November. So the chief guest happened to be a serial entrepreneur himself, and I was in charge of his protocol. So he said to me that after the convocation is over, it was a morning convocation. After the convocation is over, I would like to meet one or two of the entrepreneurs from your institute. So I immediately thought of the leader of these boys, whose name was Ashwini. So I remembered that, okay, yes, so Ashwini has passed out this year, so he would be here for his degree. So after convocation during lunchtime, I went and called Ashwini. I said, chief guest wants to meet you. So Ashwini came with his parents, and they were very happy. And the story that they told was that we managed to sell that business after 2.5 years for 3 crore rupees. So he came from a very ordinary family. In fact, all of the students were from normal families, and 3 crores is a huge amount of money. And of course, the chief guest was very happy. But later on, when because I was looking after his protocol, I was going to drop him to the airport. He said that, Tanuj, see, one thing you realize is that had this boy been in a different place, let's say had he been in NCR or Mumbai, or had he had some mentor like me, I would have started bargaining at 40 crores and I would have got him a deal of 20 crores, possibly. So there is a learning experience here also, that you should know how to sell, you should not undersell. But anyway, so the learning experience from this was that there has to be an understanding of how to protect the intellectual property right. And therefore, all promoters, and I keep on saying this in all my talks, they need to go through an orientation on intellectual property rights. They need to be informed of the following tenets: know your rights, know under what conditions these rights are applicable, know what are the exclusions, because it's possible that there is fine print and there is some exclusion. Be very, very protective of your intellectual property rights. So if you have students who are also into entrepreneurship, please make sure that you make them aware of these aspects. Okay. Another thing that we learned was that those businesses which have a presence across platforms, which means that it's possible that they may have an online presence as well as an offline presence, that adds to success factor. So offline presence means brick and mortar, and online presence means click and mortar, and that will include mobile platforms. If you are present across platforms, you are able to reach out to a wider range of customers. Then it's very important to leverage whatever technology is currently available. As for example, I mentioned these students that I was talking about, they were using 3D printing. So 3D printing happened to be reasonably recent, and they had applied that technology to their benefit and they made money out of it. Also, it's important to not be dependent on one particular service, but to have a spectrum of services, because there are business cycles or economic cycles and they lead to business success or failure. So if there is presence across a broad spectrum of services, then it does help. Particularly, there was a point of time before UPI came into the picture. UPI is Unified Payments Interface, where mobile wallets were very successful. They were substantially successful, and almost all the companies worth their salt were offering mobile wallets. Now, once UPI came in, it grew very fast, but it grew at the cost of mobile wallets. So those mobile wallet companies that also ventured into UPI continue to survive. Okay, I'll just break for a minute and check. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because there's always a risk that I might get disconnected in between and not even realize it.
Oh, fine.
Thank you so much. And if anyone has anything to contribute, or please go ahead and contribute. So there are specific examples wherein a company with multiple offerings has survived only on the strength of a large range of offerings. Of course, this is again a no-brainer. You need to be, so this is one of the 3 tests. The third test was that, is it affordable? The offering needs to be competitive in terms of price. India happens to be one of the most price sensitive markets across the globe. We are highly price sensitive. So at least in India, price competitiveness is vital to survival in India. And as we discussed, this is one of the reasons that these cab hailing, ride hailing companies are doing so well, because they are offering services at highly affordable prices. They are competing with uh, less convenient modes of transport. Also, the unique thing about India is that the clientele is largely educated and it knows its rights and it insists on getting those rights. It also knows the available alternatives. And to help or to make matters even more difficult, price competitiveness, you have so many sites which are again business opportunities, which allow you to compare across websites. So if I'm buying an airline ticket, there are sites which will tell me that okay, X, like Yatra, Make My Trip, Go Ibibo, or whatever, this is offering. They are offering this at this price. So similarly, if you're booking a hotel, if you're buying an insurance policy, you see that ad all the time. You know that you have comparison sites. Even if you're buying a particular item from an e-commerce, there are websites which will tell you that at e-commerce site A, this is the price of this, at e-commerce site B. So what customers do, probably across the world, but at least in India, they will first make a comparison, and therefore price competitiveness happens to be vital. So for that reason, comparison sites are highly successful. In fact, I never really bothered with these comparison websites, but when my son does his bookings, he will always do it from a site which allows him to compare the airfares, and he always ends up getting very good deals. So remember, the offering with the most competitive price will get better results. So taking a break for 1 minute from what we were discussing, we were also what we learned from interacting with the students when we were screening their business ideas was, like I said, we realized that they did not need our space and they did not need our money. So what did they need actually? This is very important. I had missed out on that. They needed inputs on 3 or 4 things, maybe more. But the good thing is that as academicians, you would have budding entrepreneurs or incubation centers in your own institute. So the good thing is that these are all things in which as academicians we can contribute. One thing, of course, was they did not know about intellectual property, but that was one aspect. What they really needed was hand-holding support. Now, hand-holding in terms means nurturing in terms of how to make your brand, uh, how to take it to the next level. What that means is that that like for this girl whose example I gave, she was producing chicken feed from sorry, from leftover food from the hostels. Now, till concept stage, her idea was very good. But for the next level of maturity, she needs to understand that in order to make it commercial, she has to take it to that level also. So she actually had no clue. She had come up with the idea, and actually, this is common with almost all young entrepreneurs, that they have very good ideas, but they like to take one step at a time. So most of the students whose ideas we saw had really no idea of scaling up. How you're scaling, how do you intend to scale up? They also had no idea of branding. So once you are scaling up, you need to distinguish yourself from so many competitors that already exist in the market, or even if there are no competitors, you need to make yourself visible, your product visible. So that's what I'm talking about here, brand visibility. So the problem is that there is overwhelmingly large number of products and services in the market. So it becomes very expensive or difficult to establish one's unique brand in the minds of the customer. You need huge amount of PR, public relations exercise, to actually achieve that. And the problem is that if the brand is not visible, it will not sell. So, as I had brought up earlier, Indian ventures have utilized the concept of media for equity really well. They have taken full advantage of media for equity, because otherwise you can understand they don't have the kind of funding that will allow them to spend on media. So to spend on the PR exercise that public relations exercise that I was talking about. Now the ability to come up with financing, and as I mentioned here, there are quite a lot of financiers who are right now willing to help out in this aspect, naturally with their own commercial motivations, but still it has not proved to be a hindrance by and large. We have various sources of financing, be it debt or equity, but the ability to come up with financing is important. So innovative sources such as crowdfunding will always help. But interesting thing is that we always talk about India as a equity starved economy. It is not an equity starved economy, and you have decent number of people who are willing to invest in new entrepreneurship ideas or startups. Okay. Sorry. Now, the ability to pitch. Here, I would like to mention that why I brought up Meta or Facebook is that, and why I advise that you should just go and take a look at this movie, The Social Network, is it brings out the importance of teams. Now, a team is different from a group because team has the aspect of complementarity of skills, which means that my skills complement your skills, and there could be 4 or 5 people in my team. I am good at part A, you're good at part B, third person is good at part C. Together we are able to get the task accomplished. So in that sense, it is different from a simple group. Now in your team, it is important to have a storyteller. So pitch means the ability to sell your product to a customer, because ultimately when you are going to scale up, you need to either take it public, which means come up with an offering, or to sell it to some bigger entity like this student did, this group of students. Now the same group of students who are making unmanned aerial vehicles, if I tell you about the leader of that group, he was completely unable to speak. He could not communicate normally. He could not see eye to eye. He was good technically, but he had serious problems in communicating, and he had very poor grades also. He was not academically very sound. That does not take away anything from his abilities as an entrepreneur. But in that team, he actually had one person who used to make the presentations for him, and this person was at the extent of brilliance when it came to making presentations. Similarly, this railway linen, there was a company that came because it wanted to finance their idea. So I was there, I was coordinating that visit, and the person who was evaluating their idea, he said that there were 2 students who were presenting that, and it was just a team of 3 students. Out of that, 2 were presenting. He said that both of you are such beautiful storytellers. You are able to tell a story. So apart from being, so what I'm saying is, entrepreneur needs to be wearing many hats, and out of those hats, the ability to tell your story so that you can sell your idea. Ultimately, at some stage, you will have to sell it. That is the ability to pitch, because this ability, see, it is possible for young entrepreneurs to underprice their business idea, as I just gave the example of Ashwini. So professional help can be of immense value. So therefore, you need the ability to tell your story in a convincing manner, or get someone on board as your team member who has this ability. So if your team lacks that particular skill, then you make up for that lacking of skill by getting someone on board who's good at selling. This is important. Yes, and of course, if you are not interested in including any other team member, then like you could have faculty that could help you, or even other um, angel helpers that could help you even without charging for their expertise, or even if they do it for a charge. But you need to pitch. And remember, it pitching means you're not just pitching to general public. You could be pitching to for an IPO, so for an IPO investor, or for a buyout, or you could be invest when you're scaling up. You could be pitching to an investor like Sachin Tendulkar or Amitabh Bachchan, who are also right now investing. So you need to have the ability to tell your story to these people, because they will that will actually dictate whether you are able to sell your idea to them or not. So having industrialists on board, having known investors on board, adds a lot of value to the business, at least in the perception of others, because not only do they bring deep pockets, which means a good amount of money to invest, but they also bring in their experience. And once they are invested in your business, they will definitely share that experience to help your business do well. So well-known people like Ratan Tata, he has nothing to earn. He is doing it more to support the entrepreneurs. But people like Ratan Tata or Sachin Tendulkar or Masayoshi Son, who is from SoftBank, they invest in startups as angel investors. And if supposing they are on board, you have managed to get them on board, which means they are part of your business as being financiers, then think of the kind of brand ambassador that you have with you. So all of this, of course, depends upon the ability of the promoter to pitch his or her business. And most importantly, I cannot stress on this enough. Build the right kind of team. So apart from being a good communicator and good ideator and risk taker and all of that, entrepreneur needs to be a team builder as well. So your team skills need to be good. You would hardly have seen too many people who have done very well working alone. So you talk about Google, it is Larry Page and Sergey Brin. You talk about Microsoft, you talk about Apple, you talk about Facebook. These are the successful companies in the world. You have good teams leading them. So these and other successful businesses have evolved as an outcome of combined efforts of team members in their respective domains. And therefore, it is imperative to build a team with the specific expectations, roles, and responsibilities of each team member, which is communicated to them. So it is planned out that this is what I need to do, this is what you need to do, etc., etc. It is marked to them in advance and properly communicated to the entire team. So this is again very important for successful entrepreneurship. Now, before I open the house for discussion with all of the esteemed participants, I would like to say that talking from optimism, more from optimism, but also from observation, the future holds a lot of promise for the Indian economy and the people of this great nation. So, what is our role? We are academicians, and we are at some place. We are also policymakers. So, it is up to us to shape the direction in which we want our future generation to head. And therefore, the ability to build a successful business enterprise is likely to be of vital importance for the future of our economy, because what it is going to do is it is going to channel the education that we have provided to our youngsters. It will channelize that education into productive and gainful employment so that they become job creators rather than job seekers. Okay, so this is not important. So I think that's enough of one-way traffic for a FDP. I would like to invite your observations, your comments. I can actually see almost, in fact, more than 75 participants, which is a very good number. Does anyone have any experience that they would like to share in the area of startups or entrepreneurship or business ideas?
Friends, we had a very good lecture from Dr. Tanuj Nandan Saab, who gave many examples and his live experience. He discussed his live experience in the session.